This morning we're going to look at stand guard, do not be deceived. Now before Easter we were working through our sermon series on the book of Joshua and are finding encouragement for our faith journey. Since it's been a few weeks, I think it may be helpful. It was helpful for me as well, but helpful for those of us who may have missed something along the way or again forgotten what was preached 3 weeks ago or 4 weeks ago or 5 weeks ago, to give you a little review of what we've looked at through the books of Joshua that we've looked at so far. So we looked at Joshua 1, and we looked at having faith for the challenges ahead. We learned that we should receive the challenge. It's important to receive the challenge. That it's important for us to recognize God's commitment to us on our faith journey. And we learned that if we want to overcome the obstacles ahead, we must respect God's commands. Then we looked at Joshua 6. We looked at having faith to overcome obstacles. We said that if we want to overcome obstacles, we need to communicate with God. We need to be obedient to His leadings and direction, and have the confidence that God is able to turn what seems to be impossible into the possible. We then moved to Joshua 7. And we were reminded that even on this faith journey, there are times that victory meets defeat. We saw what happens when sin and pride take precedence over relying on God's faithfulness to do what He desires to bring victory. Then we looked at Joshua 8, when we saw that the Israelites experienced victory once again after the defeat at Ai. We saw the importance of following God's plan, and that we should be mindful to rejoice in the provision of God. But we are to give thanks in every situation of life. And at the end of the day, what God desires most is that we renew our commitment to Him. You see, the regained ground that the Israelites experienced wasn't the physical ground captured at Ai, but it was the real regained ground was the renewed commitment of God's people to Him. A few moments ago we read from Joshua 9. And in this chapter we see that Ai was not to be the final battle. There were more cities to capture, and thus more battles to fight. There were more. One defeat does not lose the battle, and one victory does not win the war. You see, the devil is not excited about the prospect of victory for the people of God. It was true for the Israelites. It's true for us believers today. We must be aware of his strategy and recognize when he seeks to lead us astray with deceptive actions. Let's look at this daring deception of the Gibeon people. Joshua 9:3-6 reads, "However, when the people of Gibeon heard that Joshua had done to Jericho and Ai, they resorted to a ruse. They went as a delegate whose donkeys were loaded with worn-out sacks and old wineskins, cracked and mended. They put worn patches and patched sandals on their feet and wore old clothes. All the bread of their food supply was dry and moldy. Then they went to Joshua in the camp at Gilgal and said to him and the Israelites, 'We have come from a distant country. Make a treaty with us.'" One of the things that I noticed is that the news about the Israelites' victory became widespread. So because of this widespread news, the Israelites experienced opposition in two forms: direct and indirect. The direct opposition came from kings in the area who began to unite together to stand against the Israelites, and indirect opposition came from the Gibeonites who resorted to deception. So while other kings were forming alliances to fight Israel, the Gibeonites, knowing that they were unable to defeat Israel, developed a sole plan. We see that with old clothes, old wineskins, and moldy bread, they sought to convince Joshua that they had come from a faraway land and had been led to Israel as a result of hearing the great things of Israel's God. The problem was, God had told the Israelites in Exodus 23:31-33, "I will establish your borders from the Red Sea to the Mediterranean Sea, and from the desert to the Euphrates River. I will give into your hands the people who live in the land, and you will drive them out before you." Do not make a covenant with them or with their gods. Do not let them live in your land, or they will cause you to sin against me, because their worship of their gods will certainly be a snare to you. The lesson for us is that the devil is deceptive and will use anything to convince God's people to compromise. Satan is sly. He seeks to sneak up on the believer, and he uses subtle ways to draw us from the things of God. Christians today need to remember that Satan will probably not try to get us to deny the entire Bible. He's much more content to entice us to compromise in one small way or some small way. You see, Satan snuck in towards the Israelites. The Israelites didn't consult God, and they made a treaty, a bad treaty with that. Today is no different. We can expect similar opposition as we obey God's commands. If it is our desire to be guarded against these pressures, we must rely on God and communicate with Him daily. For it is when we do this that God gives us the strength to endure the direct and indirect pressures that we face and the wisdom we need to see through God's deception, through Satan's deception. There was a mistake that the Israelites made. Careless mistake. Joshua, the men of Israel, simply sampled the provisions of the Gibeonites, but they did not inquire of God. So then Joshua made a treaty of peace with them to let them live, and the leaders of the assembly ratified it by an oath. Here again we see that the Israelites failed to consult God. The Life Application Bible has this to say about Joshua's and the Israelites' alliance. As a strategist, Joshua knew enough to talk to God before leading his troops into battle, but the peace treaty seemed innocent enough. So Joshua and the leaders made this decision on their own. By failing to seek God's guidance and rushing ahead with their own plans, they had to deal with angry people and an awkward alliance. Once again, the Israelites had forgotten who? They'd forgotten God. You see, Joshua did not seek the counsel of God, and thus failed to see the truth. And it seems to be an obvious omission, but how easily do we fall into the same trap? Paul reminds us that the devil blinds people's eyes to their need for the gospel. But he also seeks to blind believers, keeping them from turning their eyes to God. 2 Corinthians 4:4. We never arrive at a place where we do not need to read the Bible. We never arrive at a place where we don't need to pray and communicate with God. The devil seemingly tries to blind us most when we are trying our hardest. We're trying to be faithful. We're trying to live the life that God desires us to live. And you can be assured that when you walk out that door, Satan's there waiting for you. He's lurking right in the corner. He'll do his best to try to draw you away from the Word of God. And we know that. It's no surprise. Since the beginning, Satan has used deception to get away. In the garden, the serpent deceived Eve and said, "Did God really say you must not eat from any tree in the garden?" And after Eve clarifies which tree is off limits, Satan says to her, "You will certainly not die. For God knows that when you eat from it, your eyes will be opened. You will be like God, knowing good and evil." His father lies. He's deceptive. And even today, Satan uses deception to deceive men, women, boys, and girls. If we look at statistics, we see that divorce is at an all-time high. In our country, in the United States, North America. Why is this, we might ask? The answer is simple. Satan deceives men and women to believe that the grass is greener on the other side of the fence. He tells them, don't try to work out your differences. Cut your losses. Move on. One thing is certain, Satan will put someone in your path that will convince you to do exactly what he desires. And I always think about David and Bathsheba. At every moment when David was weakest, what did Satan do? He put Bathsheba out on the balcony, bathing, so that his eyes could capture her. In that weak moment, he used that to deceive David. And David gave it into that desire. You see, all we have to do is look at TV, look at the internet ads. They're designed to attract the attention of our younger generation. Not only our younger generation, I guess, as well our older generation. Satan paints the pretty picture. If you ever notice that when you see a commercial for alcohol ads or any of these ads, it's always young men and women having a great time partying, drinking, living the good life. He uses these ads to deceive our youth into believing that if you want to have a good time, if you want to live life, you need to be involved in these activities. So that's where the good life is. He's deceiving. He's deceptive. And they'll use any tactic, anything in his repertoire to try to draw us, our families, our children, in the will of God. And sure, we're dealing with it. That's what it is. And we're reminded in Scripture that our battle is not against flesh and blood. It's against the dark rulers of this world, evil. Jesus in John 8:44 says this: "You belong to your father, the devil. You want to carry out your father's desires. He was a murderer from the beginning, not holding to the truth, for there is no truth in him. When he lies, he speaks his native language, for he is a liar, the father of lies." That's what Satan is. He's a liar. Folks, this morning he's deceiving our youth. You wonder why we got empty chairs here this morning? He's deceived our youth. He's deceived my generation. He's deceived the generation coming up. He's even deceived the older generation. Church is not important anymore. Go to hockey. Go do something else. Go shopping up in the mall in Carbonear. It's all the work of Satan. It's the devil using his tactics, using what he does best to deceive the people of God. We need to be mindful of that. We need to pray. We need to be on our knees. Yes, as a small group of believers, we need to be on our knees praying for those outside these walls. Because there's a whole world out there going to hell. And unless we care, nobody else cares. It's our responsibility as believers in God to be able to see through the Satan, the devil's tactics, to be able to see through those lies. The next thing I want us to look at, though, from this context this morning is a graceful gesture. Joshua 9:26 tells us, "So Joshua saved the Gibeonites from the Israelites, and he did not kill them." Now, I'm sure that we've all heard the phrase, "You've made your bed, now lie in it." No doubt we know what this phrase means. According to Cambridge Dictionary, this phrase is said to someone who must accept the unpleasant results of something they have done. In this case, that's exactly what the Israelites must do. They have to live with the consequences of the alliance they made with the Gibeonites, and for not seeking God's guidance before they made this decision. Yeah, we know that the Gibeonites were dishonest. They had tricked the Israelites into making this alliance. Even though Joshua and the Israelites entered into a bad alliance, they kept their oath. You see, 2 wrongs would not make a right. And sometimes I wonder if we forget this idea that 2 wrongs don't make a right. There are times that we feel hurt, we feel betrayed, we feel that people have not let us down. The first thought that enters our minds, yes, even the first words out of our mouth, is revenge. Our instinct seems to be, they'll pay for that. See, nobody treats me like that and gets away with it. That's the attitude. That's our world's attitude. That's sin. That's our sinful nature. Somebody hurts you, what are you going to do? Well, they're going to pay for that. But Joshua and the Israelites didn't do that. They may have had these thoughts in their minds and were told that the Israelites wanted to do away with them. It was in their hearts. But they knew it was unlawful for them to revoke an oath, even one that was made dishonestly. God commanded that oaths be kept. Numbers 32 says, when a man makes a vow to the Lord, he takes an oath to obligate himself by a pledge. He must not break his word, but must do everything he said. Even though the oath was made dishonestly, notice that God uses our faults and failures for his plan and purpose. Joshua 9:26-27 we read, so Joshua saved them from the Israelites, and they did not kill them. That day he made the Gibeonites woodcutters and water carriers for the assembly, to provide for the needs of the altar for the Lord at the place the Lord would choose. And that is what they are to this day. You see, the takeaway for us today is to be mindful that there are deceptions lurking at every corner. Yes, there's people out there who would want to take us away from what God's desire and God's plan is. There's things out there. Satan is the master deceiver. And it is his mission to try and derail us from God's path and direction. Satan usually uses our own weaknesses against us to try and get what he wants, just like he did with Eve in the garden. It is in our weak moments that we make mistakes and fall right into his trap. It's because we fail to ask God for his direction and plan that we are deceived and are left with the consequences of our actions. This was the experience of Joshua and the Israelites. But the amazing truth is our God is an awesome God. Amen? And he usually uses our mistakes for his will and purposes. There's times I'm sure people look back over their lives, and I look back over my lives and say, how could God do something like that? How can he use something that I've done so bad for his good? But the thing is, as long as we learn from our mistakes, it becomes a tool to probably talk to somebody else, tell our friends, tell our family. Don't do as I did. Take it from somebody who's been there. There's men and women who have a great testimony of what they've done and what they would have been if it wasn't for the hand of God. God intercedes, and his grace is sufficient for all our needs. Covers our faults. And he restores our relationship. So yes, the Israelites were deceived. They made a mistake. But God's grace was sufficient to bring the victory. We're on this faith journey, folks. We're learning as we go. We make mistakes. We fall. As long as we ask God our Father to forgive us for our faults, he picks us up, brushes off the dirt, puts us on the path again and says, go, I'm with you. What are you going through this morning? What is the deceiver putting in your path this morning? What is he using to try to get you to stop trusting, to stop believing? Satan's not working hard to get those he already has. He already has them. So those of us here this morning, those of us who are washed by the precious blood of Jesus, those of us who have a personal relationship with Jesus Christ that he wants. That's who he's trying to draw. He doesn't want to serve God. He wants us doing his business. But this one, we're doing God's business here. There's a song in the song book.